Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Grayzone. Here with Aaron Mate as always, and we are really glad to have you here with us because like half of the alt media world is currently streaming something right now, and you know they may be talking about some version of what we're talking about, but not in the way we're doing it, because we have new reports out at the Grayzone from the ground in Gaza and from Capitol Hill, where I just was 2 days ago, asking congressional Republicans about Epstein. They don't want to talk. They don't want to vote on it. This has become the scandal of the week. And Aaron, unlike Russiagate, it's based on reality. And that has made it deeply uncomfortable for Donald Trump. I mean, before we get into any of Trump's statements or any of the statements that came out at TPUSA, which is one of the major gatherings of the conservative youth movement, what do you think? Why do you think Trump is so reluctant to feed his base what he's been promising them for months and months and months? I mean, it's gotten to the point where I don't think this happened this happened after our last stream. Dan Bongino has gone into hiding. He's like in a panic room somewhere in suburban Florida.
Trump's denials are so unconvincing and his behavior is so suspicious, like trashing his own supporters for asking about the Epstein Files, which his own top influencers have been hyping up for years, that I wouldn't blame people for starting to think that Russiagate was real at this point, because but he does look like he has something to hide. And he's using Russiagate to try to deflect. He's saying that the Epstein Files were made up by Democrats, by Joe Biden, when, again, nobody invented the fact that he was tight with Jeffrey Epstein, flew in his plane multiple times. What I think is going on, look, I'm curious to hear your take. The maximalist view is that there's compromising stuff on Trump being blackmailed, and this is tied to foreign intelligence. I suspect it's more along the lines of Trump is he's a known sexual predator. He bragged about it on the Access Hollywood tape. He was caught bragging about it. I suspect that there's compromising stuff on him having to do with Epstein, and that makes sense given that he hung out with them for a long time. Epstein once described them as very, very close. He flew in his plane many times. By the way, he claims not to have flown on the plane when that's just not true. There are logs. Maybe he forgot about it, or which happens with him because he also seems to have some cognitive issues like Biden did. But yeah, what I suspect is there's something compromising on him in line with his own known behavior, and he doesn't want that to come out.
Yeah, that seems to be the most mundane, basic explanation. And I think there are also people close to Trump. I mean, all Epstein's men, people close to Trump who don't want this to come out, who don't want anything to come out about them. Trump has said, it could be fake information or information that implicates people in an unfair way simply because they were on Epstein's call log. There are lies that Trump has already been exposed for telling that are pretty transparent. For example, he said back in 2024 that he was not on Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs. Here's our favorite anti-Epstein conspiracist, Michael Tracy. Trump claimed in a January 2024 Truth Social post that he was never on Epstein's plane, but the files show that the files that Pam Bondi released in February 2025, I guess that was like phase one. Remember when they duped all the hack Trump influencers with binders full of information that had already been released, contained flight logs showing that someone named Donald Trump was aboard Epstein's plane on numerous occasions. There it is. Epstein's plane, as the story goes, and this is what Clinton's people say as well, is that Epstein's plane was always available to famous people and powerful people if when they needed to get somewhere. And he was just a reliable provider of private travel for people who didn't want to travel with the general public. So they wound up getting sort of wrapped up with this sex criminal. But here's, what really is damaging Trump is just the sheer contempt for his own base. And we can see it on display. Sorry, StreamYard has changed, and we can see it on display in his, not just in his comments, but also in the optics here, which comprises the featured image of this stream. It's Trump on the tarmac with his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. Listen to Trump's comments.
Mr. President, I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so upset about how it's been handled?
I don't understand it. Why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And the credible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But
watch Lutnick react to fake news.
Pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information.
So I mean, he's urinating on his own base once again.
That's the thing. Like, even if what he's saying is true, right? That there's nothing to see here, this is all fake, it's all made up by Democrats. Then what's undoubtedly, even if that were the case, what's undoubtedly true is he's throwing his own people under the bus, because the premise for so much MAGA influencer talk and like why they were the basis for which they were saying we should elect Donald Trump, part of it was once he gets into office, he's going to expose the massive Epstein conspiracy. So he's throwing his own people, including the deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, and many others, totally under the bus.
We have a special guest. Are you ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Anya.
Hey, Anya.
Not that special.
Why is it a problem that Donald Trump is standing next to Howard Lutnick while he's denouncing his base as bad people for asking questions about why the Epstein Files and supposed client list aren't being released?
Howard Lutnick back in 2016 was gaining headlines for being a top Clinton donor. And it's funny, if you look back at the New York Post at the time, they were lamenting the fact on Hillary's behalf that she would hold a fundraiser at Howard Lutnick's townhouse in New York because of the optics. Howard Lutnick shares a wall with Jeffrey Epstein's infamous New York City townhouse, was his direct next door neighbor. And so at the time, Clinton was talked about a lot as tied to Epstein, or, there was a lot of whispering about Bill Clinton having flown on the Lolita Express. And so the New York Post and other media outlets at the time pointed out that Lutnick hosting this fundraiser for Clinton in 2016 right next door to Epstein maybe wasn't the best look. Fast forward almost 10 years later, and Lutnick has switched sides completely. No longer a Clinton supporter, but somehow weaseled his way high up into the Trump camp. And we see this statement from Trump on the heels of his tweet basically calling his supporters a basket of deplorables. He might as well have said that, saying he doesn't want their support anymore if they're still into the Epstein case. And for Lutnick to be the figure lurking behind Trump in the shadows, really, I would like to see more headlines now saying, what are the optics of that?
There's now a Newsweek story about that since the reaction on social media, which I would credit myself with helping to trigger. I got like 60,000 likes pointing out Lutnick shouldn't have been standing next to Trump at that point. Trump is really losing his touch. This is a Newsweek headline from yesterday. Howard Lutnick's ties to Jeffrey Epstein come under scrutiny. Do they cite me? Probably not. So yeah, it's all boomeranging back on Trump. A former Hillary Clinton supporter now is his wingman, denouncing his own supporters.
A top Clinton donor. And that's what's so crazy about the bait and switch that the Trump administration pulled on this issue, is that if Kamala Harris had won, I don't think we'd be getting Epstein revelations, but I don't think that it would have even been talked about. I don't think you would have had Merrick Garland going on MSNBC all the time and saying that he was looking at the Epstein list on his desk. You wouldn't have had Christopher Wray going on podcasts and saying that he believed, based on what he saw, that Epstein worked for Middle Eastern intelligence. They went so far in their acceptance and discussion of Epstein and the way that the public understood, that for them to just turn around the day before Netanyahu shows up in the U.S. and for them to say that, everything that we possibly, whether it's the idea of a client list, whether it's the fact that there was all that video equipment and videos seized, images seized from Epstein's various properties, people were expecting to see. I know people are always like, what are the files? What are the files? Aren't these files? But the government had an investigation. They ran an investigation, a long-term look at Epstein, and there's mountains of evidence that was collected in all these cases over multiple states against him and Ghislaine Maxwell, that you would assume there are at least government documents, discussions, or something that more than just this memo put forward, which basically says there's nothing. He wasn't working for anyone. There was no blackmail ring. And that was after you had the attorney general actually claiming that she had a client list on her desk. So something is deeply wrong here. And for Trump to throw, I mean, this is not just Epstein, I think, is the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to Trump's betrayal of his base. But this has basically been, this is part of the switch toward no war with Iran to bombing Iran, to we're going to have peace in Russia, to we have more sanctions and confrontation with Russia, to we're going to have mass deportations, to we're having amnesty for undocumented workers here. That is not what Trump's base voted for. None of that is. That's like, those are the core issues, I think, of what they expected him to deliver on. And so this is part of a wide betrayal. And there's just something about the Epstein case that I think, for obvious reasons, captures the public's attention and is seen as this scandal that had to be resolved because of the way that it involved both parties, so many of our elite, and that it also signaled or suggested that there's something wider going on in the United States when it comes to who's influencing and directing our government. And so I think this will be the end, really, of Trump. There's still like the hardcore Trump people that are just going to, I think, follow him no matter what and trust the system or trust their friends in government. But I think more broadly, especially with young people, they're going to start looking for someone else now to lead the America First movement. I think Trump has pretty much betrayed, not just on Epstein, but across the board, whether it's immigration or normal foreign wars, betrayed the very core of the America First ideology. And so I don't see how he can be regarded as the leader anymore.
Aaron, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. There's the whole, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm not as confident in the MAGA faithful. I don't know. I mean, certainly he has, of course he's betrayed them in so many ways, as Anya just laid out. Especially, for my purposes, the issue I'm most concerned about, which is war. I mean, he's been a complete reversal of everything he claimed to stand for. Although you can also go back to his record and find plenty of moments where he loved to brag about how subservient he is to Israel and how he would threaten also Russia with more military might. So he, in his defense, he has been pretty inconsistent. But listen, I hope to see the abandonment of Trump from his faithful. I would love it if that were true, because it'd be great if they were led by someone who actually, at least, even if I don't agree with much of the MAGA agenda, at least enacts what they claim to stand for, especially on the aspects of it that I find positive, like, for example, being against endless war and focusing on domestic needs, which Trump has never done. So I hope that happens. I hope it happens.
It's an important point. Epstein's a stand-in, or sort of a catch-all for all of Trump's betrayals, in the sense that he's now kind of one of the elites. He's had his chance. This is his second term. This is his comeback after he was persecuted in all of these various cases that are seen as lawfare by his base. And he's not actually turning against the agenda that they voted against. His party, his Republican Party, has become an anti-establishment party for many. He brings in the Bush coalition that went along with the whole war on terror. But as Anya pointed out, the generation that grew up after 9/11 and around that time, the millennials, the Gen Zers that are in Trump's camp, they are fully anti-establishment, do not trust the system, or anti-war. And he owns that. And he baited them through influencers like Dan Bongino and through Pam Bondi into believing something was going to happen here. And now they see Epstein as a bipartisan figure who has compromised Trump and people around him who they may not have been aware of, like Lutnick. And there are so many others. And the Epstein case goes so deep into the intelligence world. And Tucker Carlson kind of broke that open. I don't know if Jeffrey Epstein is a Mossad agent. He has connections to 3 former Israeli prime ministers, one especially in Ehud Barak, who visited his home 36 times. There are pictures of him kind of trying to disguise himself as he goes in and out. Started a surveillance company with possible help from Epstein. Ehud Olmert had met with Epstein. Shimon Peres had met with Epstein. Epstein hooked up meetings for JP Morgan executives with Netanyahu. And Epstein sought multiple passports to travel to Israel and Africa. He traveled to Israel in 2008 when he was fleeing prosecution. And then there's also the whole issue of Epstein in the Virgin Islands, where what Epstein is known to have done, and this is what he appears to have done with Les Wexner, who helped Howard Lutnick buy his townhome through a holding company he and Jeffrey Epstein controlled next to Epstein. And Les Wexner enabled Jeffrey Epstein to buy his own townhome for $0 down. What Epstein would do is he'd go to places like the Virgin Islands and offshore their taxes. And when Jeffrey Epstein came under investigation, remember that lady who was screaming at Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger for the Twitter files in Congress? Aaron, you're muted. She was the Virgin Islands representative. Stacey Plaskett. She has received, I think, $200,000 from Jeffrey Epstein to not investigate him. And the Attorney General, Lee Fung, has been talking about this a lot. The Attorney General in the Virgin Islands was paid off by Epstein, and he's now currently the Attorney General. I mean, there's so many angles to this story. I don't see the press actually going down there, but Democrats are implicated, Republicans are implicated. There's an Israel angle for sure, and many people are wondering, has Trump been told to shut this down by some of the foreign intelligence agencies and powerful people who are integrated into those agencies? Like Les Wexner is a proxy for Israel in the U.S. in many ways.
Right. Well,
they've been told Trump to shut this down for their own sake.
It also indicts these prominent financiers. Who are they really? Where do they get their money from? How do they operate in the U.S.? They're constantly just moving money around. Les Wexner and these other figures that are responsible for Jeffrey Epstein making his fortune, they're all pro-Israel, big money men. And so there's just a lot that could be a whole another investigation. I know, Max, you've talked about how the Israelis use figures like that to move money in the United States. So I remember also during the initial raids on Epstein that they said in one of his safes they found a Saudi passport, which was an
Yeah.
odd one, but that seems to suggest some sort of a intelligence connection. I don't know how he otherwise would have just gotten a Saudi passport. It's not something that most people could get their hands on.
Yeah. I mean, what it really is for sure. Let's just say we have no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein is a Mossad agent who worked for Mossad. And we're going to get into that in a second. But Jeffrey Epstein existed at the heart of the Zionist world. If he hadn't been exposed, he would have been one of those donors who would have been forcing Harvard University to criminalize its Students for Justice in Palestine group. Les Wexner did the same thing at Ohio State University. He was down with all those guys. Alan Dershowitz was his right-hand man, and he was seeking to start a kind of transhumanist center at Harvard University to perfect the human race. And Dershowitz would come and visit him there. Dershowitz visited his island. Dershowitz was asked by Netanyahu to represent Israel at the United Nations when Netanyahu came back in 2009. But Dershowitz didn't want to give up his US passport. So Epstein is deep in that world, and that world doesn't want to talk about it at all. I mean, Ohio State raked in $336,000 from Jeffrey Epstein through the Les Wexner Center. And this was all money washing. It might have come from Wexner himself through Epstein back there. And Ohio State cannot remove, even though Wexner stepped down as CEO of Victoria's Secret because of all these revelations, accused by women of, actually, participating in the sexual abuse of Jeffrey Epstein. Ohio State can't dislodge him because they just depend on him so substantially for money. He owns downtown Columbus, Ohio, and this is Epstein's right-hand man. He was also tight buddies with, what's his name? Lee Weiss, the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania business magnate, who is the father of Barry Weiss, who was just at a off-the-record, semi-secret retreat in Sun Valley with the, top figures in tech, finance. Chuck Schumer was there. Allen and Company, we talked about it last week. Allen is one of her top donors. So what I'm saying is all these people are scratching each other's backs, and Epstein was in the middle of it. So it's perfect that this would have to be buried at some point, along with the missing minute. I mean, this videotape of Epstein's cell appears to have been manipulated. So I want to talk about TPUSA, though. I'm kind of like going down the rabbit hole too far, but I wanted to establish that. So here's Tucker Carlson at TPUSA, just like everything exploded after this point.
Not acceptable. And I think the real answer is not acceptable. And I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of intel services, probably not American. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan?
And Donald Barr, William Barr's father, was the headmaster of Dalton School,
Yep.
hired Jeffrey Epstein, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Where did all the money come from? And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty.
And listen to the applause.
There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that. I've spent my entire life pretty much in Washington, where I knew and loved a number of people, including one very close person who worked at CIA. That has never prohibited me from saying, I think the CIA has done some horrible things, murdered a bunch of people, participated in the murder of a sitting US president. It's got a whole trail of crimes. That doesn't make me a disloyal American. It doesn't make me anti-American in any sense. I was born here. My family's been here for hundreds of years. I love this country. That's why I live here. So criticizing the behavior of a government agency does not make you a hater. It makes you a free person.
So we get the point. And this was sort of the lecture that so many young, I don't even know what to call them, America firsters had been waiting to hear delivered to the conservative movement. You know, don't trust the elites. The CIA is a secret government. This is not like hating America. And Israel is actually kind of evil and plays a malign role in US politics. But I mean, people are, I see liberals saying, oh, this is the stupid wing of the Republican Party. This seems to me like the critical thinking wing.
I would rather have Israel scrutinized in a different way, the U.S. support for Israel scrutinized in a different way, just in terms of like morality, like why are we supporting this insane mass murdering ethno state and how does it serve our interests? I think that's where the focus should be. But if it has to be through the prism of Jeffrey Epstein, like I'll take it. Even if I think, I'm not ready to endorse some of the maximalist views on Jeffrey Epstein and Israel and Mossad and all that stuff, because I haven't seen the evidence to sway me in that direction. But whether I'm right or wrong, I do think this kind of scrutiny on Israel is healthy. And if this is the way, this is the form it has to take, then I'm all for it. And I wish also what we're seeing at that conservative gathering would be mirrored on the Democratic side. But whenever the issue of Israel comes up on the Democratic side, even as it's reflected in the polls with people being disgusted with what Israel is doing, the Democratic leadership still will not budge. So far right now, we're seeing more movement, it seems, more openness inside the MAGA movement than we are on the Democratic side, even though it's through this prism, this relatively narrow prism of Jeffrey Epstein.
I mean, I think Epstein, the way that these people discuss it, kind of gets to the heart. That what they're getting at is U.S. government manipulation by the Israelis. That's what they're getting at, and that exists whether Epstein is proven to be part of that or not. And if he's not working for the Mossad, I mean, what Max, you already laid out connected a lot of the dots, or just who was behind him. The fact that they, again, seized all these cameras in every room and tapes, that there was some sort of filming and all like that was going on. They won't tell us now what they discovered in any of those seizures, but what was all of that for? I mean, and what all of the fleeing to Israel to avoid arrest. I mean, it could just be because that is where, I guess, pedophiles tend to go if they don't want to be extradited.
It's where people who are Jewish go who don't want to be extradited, no matter what they do, because they just don't extradite. The only person who Israel has refused into its borders who is fleeing crimes was, I don't know if anyone can guess this. He was portrayed in the Godfather.
Oh, I know who it was, but I can't remember.
Meyer Lansky. Okay. Anyway, Anya, I mean, TPUSA, how frightening was that speech to the Israel lobby?
Well,
and
Tucker wasn't the only one. Tucker is the one that everybody followed. Like, he's the most popular figure within the America First popular movement. But a lot of other guests at TPUSA discussed not only Epstein, but they had a debate about Israel and Gaza, which for that to happen on Charlie Kirk's platform is what tells me this is a shift happening at the grassroots level that they can no longer ignore, because Charlie Kirk would happily ignore it if he could. He would never discuss Israel or even Epstein, I think, if he didn't have to, because he represents what is the grassroots young conservative movement. What is the future of I don't even want to say Republican Party. I just want to say conservatism in the United States, because I'm not sure that they will last as Republicans. But it's like the boomer generation. Once those people are out of the way, and this TPUSA movement grows up, these are kind of the people that were college students under the first Trump, are now in their late 20s, early 30s under this era of Trump. And they, I did this deep investigation look at Nick Fuentes a few years ago, because under Trump 1, he was leading this movement of college students that would go to TPUSA events Charlie Kirk events on college campuses and interrupt them, or even just ask respectfully during Q&A about the special relationship with Israel, about the USS Liberty. I mean, they would put Charlie Kirk on the spot at almost every university he went to, and they humiliated him because they showed that he didn't really represent America first. He was willing to deny that the U.S. Liberty was attacked by Israel. He was not willing to resolve the contradictions between saying that he was America first, but then taking these positions that were very pro-Israel that didn't match with U.S. interests.
Okay, so wait a minute. So, okay, for those who don't know, Charlie Kirk is the founder of TPUSA, which is the youth wing of Con Inc., Conservative Incorporated. It's sort of like Mick conservatism. It's astroturfed. It has been. It's
also
he's been supported. It's college students, so the students might not be able to be as easily propagandized.
Yeah.
And David Horowitz was his mentor. David Horowitz was a channel for Zionist billionaire money. They helped create Charlie Kirk. He's never like worked a job or done anything. Like, he was like a child actor in the conservative movement, funded entirely by Israel. He went on a junket trip to Israel, was celebrated by the youth movement of Netanyahu, Im Tirtzu. And here's the Groyper Wars that Anya refers to back in 2019, where Charlie Kirk was put on the spot by, these are like anti-Jewish elements. They're not just anti-Zionist, and they're trying to show that, Jewish power has been malign inside the United States. And it makes Charlie Kirk deeply uncomfortable because he has so many wealthy Jewish backers, but it also relates to Israel and Zionism directly. And like, from a conservative right-wing point of view, what they were doing was pretty clever, regardless of whether you think it, like, you agree with them or not.
Well, they also were just pretty much correct.
$1 billion. So from America,
okay, well, you endorsed it.
Why do we give
versus Charlie Kirk?
Wait, can we let's watch this, and then we're going to get your take on the Israeli responses to and Charlie Kirk's response. But I just wanted to illustrate on his point.
From America First perspective, why do we give $3.8 billion to Israel, which is more aid than we've given to Africa, more aid than we've given to South America, and more aid than we've given to the Caribbean combined, which is home to 1 billion poor people, especially when they deliberately attacked the USS Liberty in the 1970s.
That is incorrect. Do not peddle conspiracy theories in our event. That is not acceptable. Do not say that.
Okay, Dean Rusk disagrees with you, and he was the Secretary of State at the time, but that's fine. And then the second part is also, you have the Apollo incident in which they illegally stole weapons-grade uranium. The CIA has reports on this.
Anti-Zionist,
No, I'm not anti-Israel. I'm just asking from America perspective because it's not in our interest. They act against our interest.
Remember the short question part?
Sure. I mean, how is it in our interest that we give this money to Israel?
All right, so it's required that they have to buy American weaponry.
You can see he's holding a Christian cross in his hand to kind of emphasize the point that they are the true America first, and Charlie Kirk is bought and paid for by a foreign nation.
So it's required that they have to buy American weaponry. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, the only place where all 3 monotheistic religions are allowed to peacefully practice. It's the only country in the Middle East.
Don Jr.'s clapping along.
Yeah.
Where all 3 monotheistic religions are represented in their government. It's the only place in the Middle East that has any appreciation for LGBT rights whatsoever. It's the only.
So Charlie Kirk is now pro-trans.
Yeah.
I mean, this is amazing because he's one of the most anti-trans people now online, and he would be, but he's now saying they have gay pride parades, so it's all good.
In the Middle East that doesn't throw homosexuals off the top of buildings when they find them. It is the only partner that we have in the fight against radical Islamic terrorism. And the subtext of your narrative could be extrapolated to say, well, why on earth would we have a partner like Israel? Guess what? The world's a better place because of Israel. The medical patents, the technological innovation, the human rights, the one common denominator of Israel since its founding, since Israel was legal.
So they totally exposed him, and then he goes like rainbow flag, neocon liberal. It's just hugely embarrassing. This is 2019.
Happened again and again and again. It wasn't just one campus. It was just everywhere he went. And so from like the logic of America First, from that perspective, I do think those people were very effective in revealing Charlie Kirk to be a huge hypocrite and phony. And so now, what is it? 6 years later, Charlie Kirk has had to pivot because it's clear that now, if he had those college campus events, way more of the student body, I think, would probably think like that student who stood up, because of everything we've experienced over the past 3 years. And so he's panicking, shifting, allowing for this discussion of Israel on the TPUSA stage. I mean, they had a debate about Palestine, and it wasn't Epstein focused. For that to happen at a conservative, huge, I mean, they are an organization that represents Con Inc., but they are what they exist to do is shepherd the grassroots and speak to the grassroots. And that's why Charlie Kirk, during the bombing of Iran, was coming up with all these lines like, oh, it's actually okay that Trump's just bombing the nuclear facility because he's always been against Iran having nukes. Like, he's the one that feeds these lines defending Trump to the base. But when it came to Epstein and this one issue, it really fell apart. And I think it does show that there is a shift in the youth, in the people that voted for Trump. And I do think that that group, the fact that even Tucker and these people are speaking out, it shows that the kinds of people, the young people, the grassroots base, aside from boomers, is not going to be going along with Trump just no matter what he does. The fact that they were that critical of Trump at an event like that, I mean, can you imagine if during Biden's first administration there'd been a Democratic Party equivalent of a big grassroots meeting where Israel dominated the discussion and they had a debate about Israel? I mean, that would have been crazy, but they don't do that.
Well, that, October 7th sort of changed the whole dynamic. And if the Democrats had attempted something like they used to have, the Campaign for America's Future or Take Back America's Future, they would have all these events. If that happened now, it would be so uncomfortable, and they would have to deal with this because the Democratic Party base, the base is in the same place, the young base. None of them support Israel. None of the party progressive base supports Israel. And if they do, they're going to go to the Republican Party. So this was also deeply uncomfortable for Israel. I've never seen anything like this. This is the former Israeli Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, denouncing Tucker Carlson. As a former Israeli Prime Minister, with the Mossad having reported directly to me, I can say to you, and with 100% certainty, the accusation that Jeffrey Epstein somehow worked for Israel or the Mossad running a blackmail ring is categorically and totally false. So he uses very precise language, which means that if Jeffrey Epstein had very close contacts with the Israeli government or was a Israeli government cutout moving money and didn't run a blackmail ring on their behalf, but performed other services, well, that could be true, but this is false. And then, but the most interesting part is the last two lines. Naftali Bennett says, they just make things up, say it with confidence, and these lies stick because it's Israel. Sounds like something Israel does like every 5 minutes. There's a vicious wave of slander and lies against my country and my people, and we just won't take it anymore. So that's, to me, an implicit threat against Tucker Carlson. And this was not the only threatening post directed at Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk, who, I mean, Tucker seems like kind of like a free man. Like he's just willing to say whatever right now. He's just like at a stage in his life where he just doesn't care anymore. But Charlie Kirk has a lot more to lose. And as I explained before, and Anya explained, they kind of created him as a youth astroturfed activist. Amichai Chikli, less well-known, deeply devious, insidious figure operating in the United States as the Minister of Diaspora Affairs for Israel, sends an open letter to Charlie Kirk, blah, blah, blah. You're so gifted. And I've been following you. And Tucker Carlson's speech and your debate with Megyn Kelly filled me with sorrow. And then he says, I don't know whether Jeffrey Epstein was an intelligence asset for any agency. I would like to know. And then he attacks Epstein for being friends with prime ministers who were on the so-called left in Israel, the genocidal left, like Barak and Olmert. it goes on, and then until he says, that Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and all these figures, Daryl Cooper, are Nazis who love Hitler, and you just can't be platforming these people anymore. So they're basically telling Charlie Kirk, if you platform Tucker Carlson again, it ends with a photo of Tucker. We're going to take action. And who is Amichai Chikli? I mentioned he's a minister. He's basically like an Israeli spy in the United States, or an intelligence asset. I'm not going to go so far down the rabbit hole, but in The Guardian, Jack Paulson and Lee Fang did a series of articles about how Chikli is moving Israeli government money through NGOs set up in the US to skirt the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is what the forerunner to AIPAC did under Isaiah Kennan in the early 60s, which got them under investigation by Senator Fulbright, an investigation that was eventually squashed. So this is a guy who's basically running Israeli ops in the US.
But this is also what gets to the core, the issue of, like, did Jeffrey Epstein work for Mossad? Well, did he work for the Mossad, or did he maybe just work for pro-Israel Jewish billionaires that were funding him to get him to do this? Like,
who themselves are Mossad.
Exactly. That's the thing, is all the way that these money men work is that a lot of them are fronts. They might not be the Mossad. So they might be able to say, like, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't answering to Mossad, but what was he doing? What were all those cameras for? What was he filming people for? And what was the interest of if he wasn't working for Mossad, which is totally possible, we pretty much do know that he was working for pro-Israel billionaires.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point. Like, even if there is no direct Mossad tie, the point is all these slime balls are pro-Israel, and
they're pretty much Mossad fronts. I mean, that's what they are.
And it speaks to the decay of our elite culture. Like, these are finally people who do predatory things, who also are all subservient to Israel, and that fact right there, even without knowing all the missing details about Epstein, is damning enough, because ultimately what they're supporting is one of the worst crimes in human history, and one of the worst entities in human history, Israel, which, we're going to talk later on the show. The violence continues to expand. I mean, now attacking Syria, even though they put the new government in Syria in power, now they're still even attacking them.
Yeah, not just attacking Syria. They've been attacking Syria, attacking Umayyad Square. It's like it's like the World Trade Center or something. It's crazy. I went to University of Pennsylvania. I think at the time that, like, Ivanka was there, or Don Jr. was there. Trump went to Wharton. They're like, everybody wanted to go into finance from there. So I got to know, like, some of the future leaders of the dying empire. And I remember the only time I saw a line around the block for a speaker there was when Warren Buffett was speaking on campus. It was like a very spiritually vapid place to be. But I carried on with some of my college friends. Some of them did go into finance, and one of them told me that this guy he knew in New York, who was an Israeli American, I think not a venture capitalist, but an investment banker, major guy. I won't name him because I don't want to get sued. Would brag about how the Mossad would just ask him to deposit tons of money into newly set up shell accounts and promise to pay him back later so they could fund foreign operations, black operations. And as an Israeli patriot, he would do it, and then they would always pay him back. Like, he could always count on them to pay him back. And this is a guy who's moving in very elite circles, has friends with, like, famous rappers and celebrities. And that's the way it works. So it's not like someone is getting some, like, Mossad card and then being told, like, you're going on some operation with, like, guns and, a bag of gold. It's much more sophisticated than that. And it's usually cutouts.
And Israel is very effective at that, because there's so many gray areas and ways that you can't like Bill Ackman, for example. He's acting in his own capacity as like an American, but he's ultimately, obviously, it's clear where his allegiance lies.
I was going to ask Aaron about Kash Patel, but we'll wait till he gets back.
Cash is kind of silent.
We haven't seen anything about Kash. Well, Charlie Kirk has spoken since being threatened by an Israeli official who, by the way, that guy, Amichai Chikli, he follows me. I'm like, I look at all the accounts he follows and I'm one of them. So I wonder what he has in store for me.
Uh-oh.
Or maybe I should DM him some questions. I actually had another Israeli official DM me something about how badly Israelis were suffering under Iranian attacks. Like, I don't know why they did that, but I didn't touch the link because I don't want Pegasus software.
Plenty was said this last weekend at our event about Epstein. Honestly, I'm done talking about Epstein for the time being. I'm going to trust my friends in the administration. I'm going to trust my friends in the government to do what needs to be done, solve it, balls in their hands. I've said plenty this last weekend. So if you guys want to see my commentary on it, that's fine. We have escalatory action potentially being taken in Ukraine and Russia. We have tons of announcements happening when it comes to NATO. But let me just say this again. Everyone knows my opinion about the Epstein thing, the messaging fumble. I would love to see the DOJ move to unseal the grand jury testimony. I think that would be a big win. I would love to see that. And I'm going to trust my friends, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, my friend Pam Bondi, all these guys. I'm going to Todd Blanche. I'm going to trust them to solve it. Balls in their court. I think that there was plenty of, let's say, speeches that were directed towards this topic this last weekend. So we don't need to spend our valuable time on this program relitigating it.
We don't. We will do it. We're just going to keep talking about it forever because it's so uncomfortable for you and for, all the neocons. Mark Levin was denouncing it. The guy who Netanyahu congratulated for helping push Trump to bomb Iran. Ben Shapiro, don't talk about it. You can see behind Charlie Kirk, there's a big
Dave Portnoy.
Sorry?
Dave Portnoy.
Oh, Dave Portnoy.
You've got
I missed Dave
Portnoy.
These
are the people telling us to stop talking about Epstein.
I missed him saying that because I was too busy watching him have meltdowns in pizza places. And you can see behind Charlie Kirk is Bitcoin.com. Like, he has major corporate sponsors. Like, he's making a lot of money. He doesn't want to go too far. They have so much leverage on him. Aaron, where you interviewed Kash Patel twice for the Grayzone when he was at HIPSI, which was investigating the Russiagate hoax. What do you think is going on there?
The interview was after he left government in early 2021. At that point, he had been on HIPSI, and then he, had a lot of top positions under Trump in the first term. He was like the chief of staff at the Pentagon. He was a senior official, the director of national intelligence. And look, I've always said I thought he did a really impressive job uncovering Russiagate on HIPSI, and he got pilloried for it. He was like, in the eyes of Russiagate devotees, he was enemy number one because he helped expose serious fraud at the FBI. And I personally appreciate his willingness to take on the intelligence community back then and to weather a lot of hits for it. But now look, he's the director of the FBI and he's working under Trump, and everyone in the Trump administration has fallen in line fully behind Trump. And it's just a little awkward that, especially I think because of Trump, Dan Bongino got put in there as the deputy director of the FBI, despite his only law enforcement experience being at the Secret Service. And Bongino especially pushed the Epstein thing. He was promising a lot. And now that he's in power and Trump doesn't want to release anything, I think it's especially embarrassing for Bongino. As for Kash Patel, look, yeah, he's a Trump guy. He's going to play along with what Trump says, and that's what he appears to be doing.
Anya, can you comment on this relationship? Kash Patel's girlfriend is Alexis Wilkins, who's an up-and-coming country singer.
Yeah, she comes out of PragerU, which, as you, I think, have mentioned before, was started by some woman with links to Israeli intelligence. Not that, I mean, I see a lot of people calling her like a honeypot, but I personally think that it might be more complex than that. I don't know.
That's one way of putting it. Yeah, Marissa Straight, who's one of the co-founders of PragerU, which aims to brainwash the youth of America and replace like educational curricula under the watch of governors like Ron DeSantis, who says he's the most pro-Israel governor in America. Marissa Straight was former Israeli Unit 8200, which is its cyber warfare division. So there's this conspiracy theory that Alexis Wilkins is an Israeli asset who is groomed Kash Patel.
She's definitely, she's kind of, I've, out of curiosity, I kind of looked at her social media and her music. She's kind of like this AI country star or star. I don't know, like how she performs constantly in front of big crowds, kind of as part of this Trump MAGA cycle. But as far as I can tell, they're really only ever together for these photo ops. Like I don't see that they live in two separate states. I don't really understand how it works, but she presents as his partner at like major events. So
she's sort of like Con Inc. set him up with some arm candy, and she gets in the limelight, and it could be a relationship of convenience, or they're deeply in love. But I don't know about the conspiracy theory, but what seems obvious to me is that Kash Patel has gained an enormous amount of stature. He hangs out at UFC events with Dana White and Trump, and everyone cheers for him when he comes on camera. He's got some country music MAGA girlfriend, and he has a lot to lose too.
I mean, it's kind of like people demanding Tulsi resign over the Iran situation. Like on one hand, I feel like if Kash Patel is probably doing a lot of, he is doing a lot at the FBI that has nothing to do with Epstein. He probably sees that he has his place where he can make a difference. And same thing with Tulsi. It's like, I don't totally shame her for not resigning, because if she were out, somebody way worse would come in, and she can at least be there presenting the intelligence that would hopefully get Trump to not go to war. But at a certain point, if you just keep running into a brick wall, I don't necessarily think Kash, I don't see him as like taking the fall for this in the same way, or it's to blame for this in the same way that Bondi. I think Bondi was the main one making promises. It was up to her to show what the Justice Department had to show for itself through all these investigations. And Bongino definitely was talking a loud game about it too. And so if I were Bongino, I would just be personally affronted by all of this and feel like I was used. Kash Patel talked a lot on podcasts about like the conspiracy files, but I didn't see it as like his number one issue going in. I thought he was more focused on like reforming the FBI overall, which he probably thinks he can still do.
His big thing is Russiagate, and if he doesn't deliver any accountability on that, then he definitely will have betrayed his promises. But I think Bongino was the big Epstein guy. On the issue of Tulsi, I totally agree. I think there's plenty to criticize her for, but like, for example, if she had not been in there, perhaps we wouldn't have gotten an intelligence assessment in March that said that Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program. And that was a really important conclusion to put out there, which helped undermine the Trump administration and Israel's case. And had somebody who was even more of a supplicant been in that office, perhaps we wouldn't have even gotten that. So,
she didn't really change her position. She just said Iran could choose to make a bomb if they want to, which has always been what the intelligence.
She was pushed to make some statement.
She was pushed to kind of say to
frame
it differently. But she
made a disingenuous statement that said the U.S. has intelligence that Iran is weeks or months away. But then she qualified it along the lines you said, if they choose to. So she still put out something that like. On the surface the Trump administration's new narrative. She did do that, and I thought that was worthy of nothing but criticism. I thought that was sneaky. At the same time, it wasn't technically false, because
Yeah.
if Israel tells you that we have this intelligence and the U.S. receives it, then all of a sudden the U.S. does have that intelligence. So what she said was not technically false, but it was disingenuous in the service of war.
At that point, it seemed like she could have been fired at any moment. Like, that's what she was up against. And I still am glad that she's there instead of somebody else.
She's been demoted essentially by Susie Wiles, who we subsequently learned worked for Netanyahu in 2020. Roger Stone tried to challenge me on that and then wound up deleting his tweet. I base my analysis on facts, and Susie Wiles campaigned for Netanyahu in 2020. And she has been excluding Tulsi Gabbard from all meetings related to Iran, so the Mossad stenographers can be in there. But going back to Pam Bondi, I mean, everyone should watch the clip of her and Sean Hannity where she's basically saying she has like binders full of Epstein files on her desk. And then, 2 days ago in a press conference asked about Epstein, she said, "Oh no, we just want to talk about fentanyl. We just want to talk about fentanyl. We're not here to talk about Epstein." Well, it's not going away. Pam Bondi is someone who was placed in her position because Matt Gaetz couldn't be attorney general. Matt Gaetz would have been a much different attorney general. He was, mocked for going to One American News and having to read ads for ivermectin, but watch his reporting on Israel-Palestine. It's remarkable. Mm-hmm. We have never had anyone on corporate. I mean, it's like he's like going further than he's going like at least as far as Ayman Mohyeldin at MSNBC. He did a report on Israeli settler terror yesterday that was just like devastating to Israel, and Israel killing a U.S. citizen. He's somehow been pilled on Israel, and he's got a platform on like a conservative cable news network to do it. This was the guy who was almost attorney general. And then Pam Bondi comes in, who's been a lobbyist for like every sleazebag corporation, especially the private prison industry that is going to benefit from ICE's enhanced budget. And she got something like $100,000 a month from Qatar. And everyone's like, "Oh, the Qatar money." Well, it's the same program as Israel.
Yeah, exactly. People who think that like getting paid by Qatar is going to somehow make you anti-Israel don't really actually understand the region. But the Matt Gaetz, before he was nominated for attorney general, said he believed Epstein worked for Israel. So I think that pretty much disqualified him off the bat. I'm curious about what red pilled him. It could just be his own experience, because that he got caught up in a blackmail ring basically in Florida.
Can you I mean, I don't know if you can.
I can't. I'm going to try to recall I can't remember like names at this point because I didn't review it before coming on, but his dad is a very influential politician in Florida. Right.
Yes.
Matt Gaetz' father. And so what happened was Matt Gaetz, when he was a teenager and like 20 years old, was hanging out with this figure that was kind of Epstein-like, but more of like a frat bro in his area in Florida, where he would have these big parties with really young girls and people would get drunk and, do whatever. Kind of, like I said, more of a frat bro style operation. And Matt Gaetz, you might remember he did this weird interview with Tucker where like he was being accused of hanging out with underage girls, and then he was trying to be like, no, a 17-year-old woman, and people were really like mocking him for that. But then the next day it came out in the New York Times that the people in Florida that he was hanging out with were trying to blackmail Matt Gaetz' father into supporting an effort to free someone who was possibly an Israeli spy in Iran.
Yeah.
Bob something. This was a high-profile case a few years back. He was someone who was imprisoned in Iran, accused of being a spy. I think he was a U.S. citizen, but was accused of spying for Israel, but I could be wrong. He could have been accused of spying for the United States. But there was this push that like, we're going to expose Matt Gaetz for being at these parties and hanging out with these underage girls. unless his dad intervened in order to secure the release of this hostage who was a prisoner in Iran. That's basically the story. So Matt Gaetz has been in the middle of
Bob Levinson.
Bob Levinson, yeah. So he was accused of spying for Israel or the U.S.
Yeah. There's a crazy long thread by Village Crazy Lady.
Yeah, I suggest people read it because she's the one that really broke it down and had all the articles.
But basically, it involves an Epstein-like blackmail ring, and that's the main reason why Matt Gaetz was tanked as Attorney General.
Yeah.
And now he's like ranting.
Yeah,
not ranting. I mean,
now he's off the leash, pretty much.
I can't read this because it's like 40 tweets.
Yeah, but look at that. That breaks it all down. That's the guy.
Joel Greenberg.
Right. That's the guy that was having these frat parties, having everybody hang out, bringing in like girls that were probably 15, 16. And Matt Gaetz was like not a very cool 20-year-old. But that they used that then to try to force his father to intervene on this international spy case. I mean, that tells you that this is like what that Epstein is just a small part of whatever people want to get at with this influence ring. It's like, wow, look what Matt Gaetz found himself in, and wherever he's from, like Tallahassee, Florida. Where is he from?
Yeah. And his father's like a local wealthy power broker who I think he kicked in 500, was like compelled to kicking in 500 grand into some like strange private intelligence op to rescue Bob Levinson. But
yeah, crazy.
Okay, so I was on Capitol Hill 2 days ago, and I just thought it would be fun. I heard about a Republican Study Committee event. Republican Study Committee event's like a caucus that has 70 members in the GOP. And they set up this new media room in the Cannon office building where all of the Con Inc. outlets, plus Zero Hedge, which is, kind of a libertarian focused outlet, but mostly just like friendly Con Inc. outlets, were going to give publicity to backbenchers. And so all of the Republicans who wanted to get some media attention and talk about issues of convenience were just basically shepherded in there. And I just kind of like walked right in and hung out in the corner. And then when I would see a Republican legislator, I would ask them about Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, and Epstein, because just a day before they had blocked a resolution on the Rules Committee to bring an Epstein vote, a vote on releasing the Epstein files to the House floor. All the Republicans blocked it under instructions from Trump. And here are some highlights. I mean, this isn't the full video. You can see the full video on YouTube. There definitely were some dissenters who were upset with Trump's decision, but this is basically what I got.
Why did the Republicans block Representative Khanna's resolution to have a vote on releasing the Epstein files? And what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. This one's for you.
Yeah, I'm going to refer you to leadership on it.
He screwed his friend over.
Why? That's a great question for the speaker's team.
How would you have voted?
It's, again, a great question for the speaker's team.
So to release the Epstein files, would you have voted yes?
People want to know that we can trust what's happening, and I trust what President Trump is doing. I trust the direction that Mike Johnson is going.
What do you think about that resolution, and how would you have voted?
We'll do an official statement from the office on Epstein files. Thank you.
What did you say? Sorry.
Our contact info for an official statement. Thank you.
On the Epstein file. You don't want to talk about the Epstein
We'll do an
file.
official statement from our office. Do you want our card or no?
Yeah, sure.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, well, what do you think of Pam Bondi declaring that after she said there were files on her desk that they're not going to...
What I'm here to talk about today is Small Business Committee and the economy and how Main Street America is growing and getting bigger every single day. That's what I'm focused on today.
Just one quick question. Do you trust the president's judgment on Jeffrey Epstein?
I have confidence in the president, confidence in his team, always have.
Trust the president. He's been truthful in the past. He's very transparent. So let's wait and see.
I trust President Trump to work with his team to disclose as much information as he possibly can without jeopardizing our national security or, harming kids or smearing people who are innocent. I think those are the confines. Otherwise, let's release as much as we can. I trust him to do it. I think a lot of people in New York knew this guy, and I think he was a bad guy. And I'm glad he's not like walking the earth terrorizing young people anymore.
CNN has obtained new information and text messages that appear to back up the sexual assault claims made last week by a male Republican strategist against a powerful and influential conservative. Matt Schlapp has denied the accusation. The strategist says that in the weeks before the election, Schlapp groped and fondled his groin during a car ride back from 2 area bars in Atlanta.
And like I said, I trust the president to work with his team to disclose everything. And it's not just this, it's a whole realm of things. There's a lot of us who've been victimized by the weaponized bureaucracy. A lot of my friends have been.
So yeah, Matt Schlapp was definitely attacked by a weaponized bureaucracy for allegedly groping multiple young male colleagues. These are the perfect people to discuss Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, this is just another issue. It's like so uncomfortable for them.
Yeah. I'm going to jump off soon, so I'll just end by saying, because I have to make sure our child is still alive, that in some ways it's like Trump is going after any Republican that challenges him, and
Thomas Massey.
Yeah, Thomas Massey. It would be scary. It's a scary time to be a Republican congressperson, and it shows that not everybody's willing to be as outspoken or brave as like MTG or Massey. And I give some of the people, like the people that spoke at TPUSA and others, credit, because I do think that for all of the lies and just insane betrayal that Trump's administration has pulled right now, I do think a lot of people are calling it out that are from his network. Like for Tucker to be such a major critic right now, I think that's what tells me that this is the beginning of a rift that is going to be something more. Because if the base, or if people didn't sense that people weren't buying, like if the people in power, Charlie Kirk, these power players, power brokers, didn't sense that the public was not buying this crap anymore, then they would all be talking like those Congress people and just saying they trust the president and they love Trump and they only care about deportations or whatever. But they're not. They are challenging Trump more than I think any element within the Biden camp or like the Democratic Party challenged Biden at any point during his presidency. So it's interesting that there's this force now within America First or within MAGA that either way, Trump isn't running again, right? He's done. He's old. This is his second term. So there's going to be a battle over the future of his political movement. And I think all of this, for better or for worse, the Iran bombing, the Israel, the bowing down to Israel, the Epstein cover up is going to create space for someone probably to come and fill the void and compete with the more mainstream elements that are going to try to take over. Because, Marco Rubio, other figures that are just part of Con Inc. establishment are going to try and seize the Trump banner once he's out of the picture. But I think because of this other element, which is the base and the youth, there's going to be eventually somebody else more radical than Trump that comes out.
Yeah,
so I'm interested to see how it plays
and
out.
They better wear Teflon on their ears if they do.
Yeah.
And all the looming Epstein vote has Republicans eager to leave Washington, and Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna's bill is making them all want to go on recess. So this is Washington right now. Jeffrey Epstein has all of the Republicans wanting to run away because they depend on Trump. I mean, this is amazing. It's real. It's not Russiagate. Anyway, Anya, thank you so much for joining us. And the crowd wants to see more of you.
Absolutely. Thank you,
I
Anya.
hope our child is alive.
if I can make one more comment about
Yeah,
Epstein,
yeah.
and then we can move on. But
you want to run away from this too? Are you?
I do. Well,
by Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, again, I'll admit to not knowing. Like I only know of the bare minimum when it comes to. I as obvious, I haven't followed it very closely, unlike you guys. But I mean, comparing the Epstein thing to Russiagate, it's not an equal comparison because unlike Russiagate, there actually is something to this Epstein thing. You can see that just with Trump's deflections alone. Like he's trying to hide something. That's obvious. And there are all these, like, unlike Russiagate, all these like Russian, these like fantasies about Russian oligarchs controlling Trump. There are, a lot of Jewish billionaire oligarchs who do have a lot of sway over both parties. And some of them are tied to Epstein, as we've been talking about. So there is something to this thing. But what I suspect, though, I mean, and there's just my suspicion, just as Russiagate was used by Democrats to deflect from the fact that they're not really a real opposition party, that like the way to explain the rise of Trump, the way to explain uniquely U.S. dysfunctions, and the way to sort of actually perpetuate U.S. hegemony was to demonize Russia for everything and therefore justify militarism against it and to also scapegoat it for uniquely U.S. problems. I suspect in MAGA that dynamic's been repeated too with some of these influencers. They want to portray themselves as being anti-establishment. They're going to take on the deep state. And so I think for them, Epstein took on this outsized importance because rather than really taking on, for example, the military industrial complex, they can say we're going to take on and uncover the truth about Epstein. And so it grew into a monster that they couldn't tame. Same as Russiagate, which grew out of control into an all-consuming conspiracy theory. And again, I'm not drawing an equal analogy because I do think, unlike Russiagate, they're actually something as to Epstein, but I think the function of it has served the party elite in some overlapping ways.
Yeah. Well, the Democrats never really got hurt by Russiagate because, as we'll discuss in the next segment, they wanted war with Ukraine. They're happy to like destroy 40% of Ukraine's working population to attack Russia, to extend Russia, as the Rand group put it. For Trump, I mean, he created a monster, and this Frankenstein monster is coming for him now, and it will not stop. It's as I said last week, it's not just about Trump or the Republicans. It's about the two-party system just losing credibility among an entire generation.
Yes, and before I forget, this is the critical point too, where both parties also don't want to have any scrutiny is Israel. And even if you take Jeffrey Epstein out of the picture, there was Trump collusion with Israel back during the first campaign. There was overlapping ties between Trump's campaign and Netanyahu. And then after Trump won, the Trump campaign, or the Trump transition team, at the behest of Netanyahu, tried to undermine the elected president Obama at the UN when Obama was going to, for once, abstain on a resolution condemning Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. And the Trump team, acting in total collusion with Netanyahu and Israel, tried to sabotage that. And Democrats didn't even bat an eye. It was they yawned. They didn't care. And MSNBC.
They diverted the whole discussion to Russia.
Exactly. So that's also where Epstein, indicts both parties too. Is that both parties have an interest in ignoring the huge foreign influence and interference, and their collusion with that interference when it comes from Israel, not Russia.
They're scared. I mean, that's why Israeli officials are threatening all the influencers. They're scared of talking about Israel now, which is where this inevitably will go. So another campaign promise that Trump has, where he's completely betrayed his base and where they feel like they were bamboozled, is on Ukraine. Trump came in declaring that he would be able to end this war, this proxy war, in 24 hours. And he made everyone think, including me, that maybe there was some progress there when he delivered Zelensky the humiliating lecture he deserved for his entitled behavior in the Oval Office. Insulting, entitled behavior, something that Netanyahu richly deserves. And now Trump is promising more weapons to Ukraine. He's going along. He seems to be supporting Lindsey Graham's pledge for 500% sanctions on Russian exports. just an escalation of economic warfare on the most sanctioned country on the planet. And there are reports we'll discuss that Trump was asking Zelensky if he could hit Moscow and St. Petersburg to improve Donald Trump's hand at the negotiating table. Aaron, what's going on here?
Well, I think there's two main things going on. One, I think, Trump doesn't have any coherent political principles, and he goes whichever way the wind blows. So after a little bit of a backlash from people like Lindsey Graham over his administration pausing some weapons to Ukraine, which they did recently, Trump caved and now wants to look tough against Russia and is announcing this new weapon shipment to appease them. I do think, though, at the same time, that proxy warriors like Lindsey Graham and others are hyping what Trump is actually committed to. He's going to sell weapons to NATO under the supposed new scheme, but I don't see really what is new there, except that this has Trump's imprint on it. Can NATO afford to pay for all these new weapons? Already, France and Italy are dropping out of this supposed scheme. So I don't know where the money exactly is going to come from to pay for these new weapons. And these reports that were in the Financial Times and the Washington Post about Trump encouraging Zelensky to strike Moscow, I think that those came from Ukrainian sources who took something Trump said and spun that their own way. So the Financial Times reported that Trump encouraged Zelensky to hit Moscow. But the problem is Zelensky can't. He doesn't have the weapons to do that. The longest range missiles he has are ATACMS, and those can't hit Moscow, and he doesn't have that many of them. He could with Tomahawks, but the Trump administration is refusing that so far, just as Biden did. And Trump was asked after that report came out, should Zelensky hit Moscow? And he said no. So I think that story that was not only in the Financial Times, but also in the Washington Post with David Ignatius, I think that reflected some spin from people who want to encourage Trump to go farther than he already has. But what he's done so far, and then you have the sanctions threat. So now he's given Russia 50 days, okay, 50 days to get serious about peace or else, right? So first of all, 50 days is a long time. So who knows how much more territory Russia can swallow up between now and then, especially given that they're in the midst of a summer offensive. And second of all, after 50 days, with him already having backed down previously on his tariffs against China, they were going to be like 145%. And after China, stood up to it, he backed down. Is he really now going to start another front in his trade war with China and with India? These are major trading partners with the U.S. Is he really going to do that over Ukraine? I find that really hard to believe. I think a lot of this is just tough talk to please people like Lindsey Graham. And not that it's not significant, because look, as you said, he promised to end the war, and he's done nothing really substantive to achieve that. He basically, the way to win the war, if he was serious about it, would be to sit down with Putin and address what Putin calls the root causes of the war. And that is two things, basically. It's NATO encroachment and the NATO military infrastructure surrounding Russia, all the missiles aimed at Russia, and things like Trump tearing up the INF Treaty, which opened up the U.S. to place previously banned offensive missiles aimed at Russia. Like, it would be to address things like that. And also the status of, territory in eastern Ukraine, which Trump is, I think, to his credit, been more willing to do. Although that's not just up to Trump. Ukraine also has to be compelled to finally agree to respecting the rights of ethnic Russians in Ukraine as well, which it's so far refused to do. So that's what he could do. So in the absence of doing that, he's caught between talking about making peace, but not doing anything for it. And also, meanwhile, wanting to curry favor with, wanting to be on the good side of Lindsey Graham and other war hawks. So he ends up now just coming out with this gesture. I think, to me, it's just his effort to look tough without really doing anything substantive. But here's his answer when he was asked about basically the reports in the Washington Post and Financial Times about encouraging Zelensky to hit Moscow. And this is what he said.
Russia, 50 days. What happens now? Do you talk to Vladimir Putin? Well, at the end of 50 days, if we don't have a deal, it's going to be too bad. But what happens? Should Zelensky get more aggressive? Yeah, the tariffs are going to go on and the sanctions go on. Should Zelensky target Moscow? Should Zelensky target Moscow, sir? Should Zelensky target Moscow or deeper into Russia? No, he shouldn't target Moscow.
So there he is shooting that down. And what I suspect is, I'm sure he asked Zelensky, can you currently hit Moscow? But whether he encouraged him, personally, I strongly doubt it, especially given he's not giving Zelensky the weapons that would enable him to do that.
Zelensky wants Tomahawks.
Yeah, he wants Tom exactly.
The Pentagon has opposed that in the past. I mean, that's a 1,600-kilometer range.
And this speaks to, by the way, how cynical Biden is, because before Russia invaded, Russia wanted guarantees that the U.S. wouldn't put Tomahawks in Ukraine. And Biden initially indicated that he would. Ray McGovern has highlighted this. Biden, in a phone call with Putin at the end of 2021, maybe early 2022, indicated he wouldn't do that. But then Antony Blinken, talking to Lavrov, walked that back and said, we're not going to rule out any missiles in Ukraine, but we will be willing to talk about caps on missiles, which for Russia was a non-starter. And then Russia invades. Zelensky asks for the Tomahawks, and Biden says no, which speaks to, it's yet another illustration of how Biden used the prospect of threatening Russia to basically bait it into invading, alongside, along the which is in conformity with the guidelines of that Rand paper you mentioned earlier. You basically extending Russia by getting it to invade Ukraine.
So isn't the problem here that Russia is basically winning too rapidly now? Ukraine's lines are collapsing. Russia's hitting recruitment centers with drone attacks in Ukrainian cities. There have been some video of Ukrainian men cheering because they don't want to go to the front. Ukrainian public is increasingly in support of some negotiated settlement. But Zelensky wants the West to keep coming in and supporting him until he can get a stalemate and force some Russian backpedaling. But Russia just keeps winning on the battlefield. So the Kremlin has no real reason to negotiate on U.S. terms and agree to the Kellogg formula for some 60-day pause, which would allow Zelensky to remobilize and get more weapon shipments. Why should they do it? So Trump is just desperately trying to find some formula of his own, using gunboat diplomacy, threats, bluster like he did with Iran, but against a much stronger country to intimidate it. And it's not working. And Russia's just not going to play that game. I think that's really what this comes down to.
I totally agree. And Trump seems to know all this. Like, this was in Politico the other day from a senior White House official. The president's view is Russia is going to win. It's a matter of how long it takes. Russia has the bigger economy, has the bigger military, has more than enough bodies to throw into the meat grinder, and just doesn't care. And although they're making slow progress, they're still making progress. The president just wants to stop the killing. So yeah, I think that's right. Everyone and the Biden people knew this too. Everyone knew that Russia was going to win. They just saw in the U.S. and other NATO states an opportunity to use Ukraine to bleed Russia and kill as many Russian soldiers as they could in the process. And that's basically still the prevailing policy. Trump is not ideologically committed to it, but he hasn't found the political fortitude to actually try to practice what he preaches and sit down with Putin and reach a peace deal. So in the absence of that, this war will go on until Russia achieves the final victory that everybody knows is inevitable.
And Trump will extend the war and betray his base and betray all the promises he made, because the preponderance of power of the military industrial complex, which is just getting all these gifts from the big, beautiful bill, the military leadership, and NATO and the Europeans are a factor here too, aren't they, Aaron? They're obsessed with continuing this war. This war would be, if there were to be a negotiated solution in which Ukraine ceded the Donbass, they're about to be dealt a punishing blow around Pokrovsk, which is a major transportation hub. It's basically been destroyed and Russia's advancing past it now. If they cede that and Crimea, NATO would treat that as like a defeat unlike any other that they've suffered, a major setback.
Yeah, because it would also expose the lie that's been their whole policy for more than a decade, which is to use the Minsk peace process as a smokescreen to integrate Ukraine militarily into NATO and use it to bleed Russia, which they're obsessed with doing. But the problem now is, like, where's the money going to come from? NATO states don't have the money to pour in to this war at the level that the U.S. does. And the question for Trump is Trump going to go before Congress like Biden did and ask for $60+ billion again. I mean, if he did that, he'd get the money because Democrats are on board and so are enough Republicans. That's the question. Call me if he does do that. Make all the fun of me in the world because I would, I'd be so naive, but I just don't see him doing that. That's just one campaign promise. I just can't imagine him betraying. And this is everyone I've talked to in the White House, around the White House, says the same thing. But again, with him, you never know. He is that brittle, so you always have to leave open the possibility.
Well, yeah, they definitely want him to, and he's getting a lot of praise from transatlantic media outlets like The Economist. Trump's U-turn on Russia is utterly cynical and welcome. His pivot on supplying arms could help Ukraine defend itself. So he's getting praised by The Economist. He's getting praised by CNN. It's like every time Trump does something militaristic, the mainstream corporate media and Democrats praise him and the beauty of our weapons, in the words of Brian Williams. It really shows the Democrats are not a true opposition party, and that this was their war that Trump is continuing. Trump, he has a little locket of Hunter Biden around his neck, and he looks at it and says, this is why we're fighting for Ukraine, and I'm going to keep doing this. I mean, if someone would just bring it back to the laptop, maybe Trump would stop. Like he has to, because he'll only stop for cynical reasons.
That's the thing. Ukraine's been used in multiple elections now, in multiple stages of his political career, to undermine him. In 2016, John Brennan got Ukrainian intelligence services to help him frame Russia as hacking the DNC. This recently came out in the New York Times. It was admitted to basically, 8 years later, that Ukrainian intelligence was used by John Brennan to make the case that Russia hacked the DNC. Okay. And then also during that same election, Ukrainian officials interfered in the US election by colluding with the DNC and by leaking claims about Paul Manafort that were at minimum overblown and in some cases false. Not that he wasn't corrupt in Ukraine, but the thing about the ledger that appears to have been fabricated by Ukraine. So, and then you had Trump's first impeachment where he gets targeted and impeached because he froze some weapons to Ukraine. And then you have also, 2020, the laptop, that being blamed on Russia, him being accused of being soft. So he's been given so many reasons just politically to take revenge on his enemies by making peace with Russia and saying, like, you tried to undermine me by using Ukraine against me and by trying to blame Russia for my political success. But he still won't do it. Because the forces of war mongering in Washington, including in his own party, are just too strong. It just shows how bipartisan this whole thing is.
Yeah.
Like Lindsey Graham, back when Russia was accused of hacking the DNC, Lindsey Graham and John McCain during their trips to Ukraine, when they went to the front lines to encourage Ukrainian forces to keep shelling the people of the Donbass, both John McCain and Lindsey Graham talked about the DNC hacking by Russia as an assault on our democracy, and we're going to fight back. So even Trump's own allies, people like Lindsey Graham, have used all the attacks on him for their own agenda of warmongering, and Trump still caters to it even today.
Well, Donald Trump, while he promised sort of an end to this and had a chip on his shoulder because of all of the pseudo scandals that had been directed against him, manufactured against him, with Ukraine as the backdrop, he also commands the George W. Bush coalition, which will support war if their leader tells them to, and are reflexively neocon. As we've been explaining throughout this whole stream, Donald Trump's base is not strictly Buchananite, skeptical of the war state, libertarian, or isolationist. And there's a new poll which shows that Donald Trump voters change their tune on arming Ukraine if they hear Donald Trump simply tell them to change their tune. It's an echelon poll, found a rise in the proportion of Trump supporters backing U.S. aid to Ukraine compared with when the president returned to the White House in January. When respondents were told that it was Trump's decision, their support rose even further. So, this has been consistent on every poll. There's just basically a bunch of cultists they don't have any principle other than Trump, and they're happy to see their tax money disappear into offshore accounts via the pockets of Ukrainian oligarchs and various weird Ukrainian ministries, like the Ministry of Digital Transformation, which will like take $100 million and spend it on 3 reports attacking Aaron Mate. Like total waste of money. So this what the poll signals is, yes, this war can continue through the entire Trump administration as long as there are Ukrainian bodies.
And that's what it comes down to. And to secure the Ukrainian bodies, what is happening? You see every day, if you want to, on social media, footage of Ukrainians being snatched off the street. Latest I saw was some guy was walking his dog, and like he gets nabbed by Ukrainian officers and pulled into a van, and the dog is like trying to like grab onto him to save him. It's just so sad. While meanwhile, the offspring of Ukrainian elites are generally exempt, and they're living comfortable lives either in Kyiv or abroad. And there was a recent headline in a Ukrainian outlet that said that Ukraine has lost 40% of its working age population. 40%, which is just, it's impossible to fathom. And that's the reality of the war that, people in the global north have been deprived of, because it undermines the narrative that needs to sustain the war. But it's a nightmare. It's a total nightmare. And unfortunately, because the Holocaust in Gaza is, a far worse crime, there just hasn't been, and because the war just keeps dragging on without an end, it just doesn't get the attention that it used to. But it's awful. And I agree with you. I basically, we're in this until Ukraine runs out of bodies to sacrifice on behalf of people elsewhere.
And my final point on this before we move on is, it's not just about Ukrainian bodies. What the Ukrainian military and SBU have always been able to do is they come up with some tactically brilliant operation or some major terror attack that convinces its Western donors through the media that they can keep giving them more funding and more weapons, and that it will still exact some price on Russia, because all they want to see is Russia suffer in some way, even if Ukraine continues to lose. And that's what Operation Spider's Web was all about for Zelensky. It had been planned for months and months, using commercially available converted drones that can drop munitions. The Ukrainian military managed to attack a hangar filled with strategic bombers, Russian strategic bombers, destroying many of them. They attacked Russian train lines. I was actually talking to a Russian friend who has no connection to government or anything, who lives in the US, who said that she would always take the train through Bryansk that was bombed by these Ukrainian drones. Many passengers had to be medevaced. And then when she goes back, she's just going to be driving. Everyone's driving now because they're afraid of the train lines, and, by design. But this was celebrated in Western media as this great operation that had changed the tide of battle. Well, it's not changing the tide of battle, because Russia continues to advance. It's just the kind of thing Zelensky does in order to keep, the PR machine cranking so he can get more funding. And I would expect more, and especially when he's gifted Taurus missiles and, long range offensive weapons. That's what the West wants to see. Now, you go ahead.
Well, let me just to highlight how dangerous this is and how the U.S. plays a key role. This is how the New York Times described that attack you just detailed, the attack on Russian nuclear assets by Ukraine. This is how the New York Times described it at the time. Some officials said Ukraine's drone attacks could be viewed as a gift to the United States. I mean, the insanity of this. Like, imagine Mexico or Canada
Lindsey Graham
attacking.
said that.
Yeah, well, like, imagine that, Canada or Mexico or some elements there attacking the nuclear triad of the U.S. and someone saying this is a gift to Russia. I mean, we would bomb Russia over that, or certainly we would threaten it. But this becomes so normalized now that we can just like wage a proxy war that includes going after nuclear infrastructure, that this can pass without comment. And by the way, Lindsey Graham also feels entitled to say stuff like this. I don't know if you saw what he said the other day about Trump and Trump's recent threats of sanctions on Russia after 50 days and also sending weapons to Ukraine. Lindsey Graham said this. He says, if Putin and others are wondering what happens on day 51 after Trump's 50-day deadline expires, I would suggest they call the Ayatollah. So what he's saying is, after day 51, or on day 51, Trump could bomb Russia, just as he did Iran recently on Israel's behalf.
No, he's calling for Putin's assassination for the second time, I believe. And, you know, this is a guy who's called to nuke Gaza. I don't think I've ever featured an Alex Jones tweet, but this is a great one. I believe Lindsey Graham may be leading a double life as Netanyahu's wife. Now it all makes sense. I mean, they do look kind of similar, like uncanny. But spiritually, Lindsey Graham is in that realm.
100%. Absolutely.
I mean, and he's a major influence on Trump. He's played, and as insane as his rhetoric seems, he's been kind of a savvy operator in trying to reposition America first as a sort of project for a new American century. And he's winning.
He is, and this is a guy who once, viciously attacked Trump when they ran against each other in the Republican presidential primary in 2016. They were bitter enemies, but he just sucks up to him, and now they're on each other's good side. And as you and Anya talked about earlier, Trump meanwhile is going after someone like Thomas Massie, who's always been nice to Trump, and he's supported aspects of his agenda. He's just been independent, especially on issues of war and especially on issues pertaining to Israel, standing up to Trump's deference to Israel. And now Trump is trying to get him primaried. So it just shows how, it's not with Trump, it's not just a matter of him being thin-skinned. There are some ideologies that are guiding him. And one of them is just basically being totally on board with the war agenda.
Well, speaking of the war agenda, Israel has attacked Syria in a way that it hasn't before. It has directly attacked the Syrian government after its officials, including, I believe, its defense minister, its minister of diaspora affairs, Amichai Chikli, who we mentioned before, called for the assassination of Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa, and it attacked Umayyad Square in the middle of the day. This is the first thing you see when you enter Damascus. It's really just a symbol of Damascus as a powerful Arab city and site of continuous civilization for thousands of years. It's not when you enter Beirut, it's just sort of sprawl and chaos, and there's no central area marking the city of Beirut. But this really is the symbol of Syria as a former Arab powerhouse, now no longer a country under the rule of Jolani / al-Sharaa. This is what it looked like. So Israel's out of control. It just bombed it. It just carried out an unprovoked assault on Iran, assassinating scientists, off-duty commanders, killing hundreds, 1,000 dead. It's been bombing Beirut. It's violated the Lebanese ceasefire 4,000 times. It's reduced Gaza to rubble. Every day it meets a quota of slaughtering about 100 people in Gaza. And now it's attacked the center of Syria, destroyed the defense ministry. At least 15 are dead. And it was reported that al-Sharaa had actually fled to Idlib, fearing that Israel would assassinate him. And they may still do it. And there's obviously a paradox here, which is that al-Sharaa has been in negotiations to normalize with Israel. He has all but surrendered Syria's sovereignty to the United States and all of the elements that brought him to power as the former leader of Syria's al-Qaeda branch, Jabhat al-Nusra, former co-founder of ISIS, brought him to power through this dirty war funded by the West and the Gulf states. And they're attacking him and hounding him. Why? Because of the sectarian attack by his forces, his Sunni supremacist forces on the Druze around Sueda in southwestern Syria. So Israel's doing like, this is like, it's supposed to be an R2P, responsibility to protect war for Israel. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is where it gets complicated, not, fundamentally, but in terms of, there are just so many different players here and factors that this is why I think some people have a hard time getting a grasp on Syria, because it requires more time to explain and get into than other conflicts or than other issues like Gaza, which is just a straight up genocide. But obviously Israel's pretext, the fact that Jelani's forces are committing sectarian killings, that can't be the actual reason, because Jelani's forces have been committing sectarian atrocities for a long time. And Israel supported the side that Jelani's forces were on, and directly supported the Al-Qaeda franchise in Syria throughout the Dirty War when they were committing sectarian atrocities. And even after they took power last year, which Israel took credit for. I mean, if you listen to Netanyahu's speeches, including his recent one when he bombed Iran, he took credit for regime change in Syria. So they don't obviously care about sectarian killings. And since Jelani took power, there have been more sectarian killings against Alawites, a lot of them. A lot more, I suspect, than even against the Druze. So that can't be the official pretext.
10,000 dead, families slaughtered in their homes.
Yeah. Now, one could argue, so there is a Druze population in the occupied Golan Heights. And so Israel could argue that this threatens their security because, attacking the Druze means that their own Druze population is under threat. They could try to argue that. But look, the bottom line is they don't care about the sectarian nature of this government, which they helped put in power and supported as it was carrying out sectarian atrocities throughout the Dirty War. And they haven't cared that they've killed Alawites. So what is the real reason? I think they just want to keep Syria divided, weak. They want to exploit its internal divisions, just as they did during the Dirty War. And they want to leave open the opportunity to take even more territory. And there's some speculation that now, because they have their sights set on Turkey, and Turkey is a close ally of the new Syrian government, the new Al-Qaeda offshoot government, that this also is aimed at Turkey as well. I saw Moon of Alabama, that website, say that that's the main reason here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think, Max?
Well, you mentioned the slaughter of the Alawites. Syria feared that they were going to break away and establish kind of a rump state on the coast. And the new Syrian junta, the coup government of al-Shura, it's been established now through mainstream media that he authorized the Muhajirin, the really sectarian, fascistic, Sunni supremacist, ISIS-oriented forces to rampage through the Alawite heartland. 10,000 were killed. The West did nothing to defend them. They were ignored. The Druze, however, in 2020, they turned on Assad and were not really opponents necessarily of al-Shura, but they wanted federalism, as do the Kurds in the Northeast, the so-called SDF, which had existed under the protection of the U.S. military, and this is now changing. The U.S. wants to leave the Northeast or reduce its footprint and increase Turkey's footprint. So enter Tom Barak, who's in charge of Syria for the Trump administration. He's the ambassador in Ankara in Turkey, and he's advancing Turkish interests. And he basically denounced any concept of federalism in Syria, which gave the green light for the Syrian HTS, ISIS, Al-Qaeda rebranded government to begin an onslaught against the Druze again, and especially these forces that al-Shura has brought in. Many of them are foreign fighters who are just like sectarian lunatics, to begin attacking the Druze. As they were patrolling in the southwest, some of them came under attack from Druze forces because they'd been abusing them. And this clash just erupted. So Israel responds because of political pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. The Druze in Israel, they live in northern Israel. All of them, the males, serve in the Israeli military. They have committed hideous atrocities in Gaza, They have also paid a heavy price. Like some of the biggest officers lost in Gaza are Druze. And so they have cachet, and they've been pushing Israel to respond and protect the Druze population. Then Israel also has its own interest. The Israeli military wants to use the Druze population in Syria as a card and say, we'll protect you. There are Druze villages that extend all the way to the suburbs of Damascus. So as Aaron, as you pointed out, this helps them balkanize Syria and occupy more territory past Mount Hermon, and then use that territory to begin pushing against Iran. So it's perfect for Israel. And then there's the issue of Netanyahu seeking possibly a 60-day pause on Gaza, or to kind of get out of there. There's a lot of pressure coming from inside Israeli society and from the U.S. to wrap things up in Gaza, at least for the time being. And so Netanyahu needs to seem tough. So he needs to attack another Syrian capital. Netanyahu was due to testify. The U.S. ambassador, I call him the U.S. Israeli reciprocal ambassador, Mike Huckabee, actually went to Netanyahu's trial as a witness, to support him. And it was postponed, I think, because of the attack on Syria. Every time Netanyahu has attacked some country, whether it's Iran or Syria, after October 7th, there's been a rallying effect in Israel, and his own corruption trials are consistently postponed, and he holds his coalition together. And, finally, there's the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, who is the main opponent of ending the Gaza operation. And so if a new front can open up, then maybe Smotrich would stand down, just as long as some other Arabs start bleeding somewhere. So it all led to this assault on Syria. And just to kind of boil it down, the Trump administration opened the floodgates for sectarian slaughter in Syria. I think Syria's minorities are threatened with extinction now because of the Trump administration and Tom Barak specifically. This will the Christians will be next after the Druze. And we can see that as long as Israel exists as an ethno-supremacist state, it's going to be in a state of perpetual warfare like it never has been before, with all of its neighbors, including those that have effectively surrendered to it. So this is a message to the Saudis, to the Emiratis, and to the Saudis and the Emiratis first, that even if you normalize with Israel, you're at best going to be a frenemy, and they're still going to humiliate you. And it's a message to Turkey or Turkey and Qatar, who are the chief sponsors of al-Sharaa and al-Qaeda in Syria. This is directed at them. What are they doing? Are they restricting U.S. access to the Al Udeid air base? Are they pushing harder on Israel in negotiations? Is Turkey suspending gas and oil shipments through Azerbaijan to Israel? No, I haven't seen much retaliation other than rhetoric and angry reports and strongly worded statements on Al Jazeera and TRT. But this is Israel's message to the entire region. It wants to dominate everyone, and not just dominate them, but humiliate them for its own sake.
A quote that came to mind for me, seeing this unfold, this new Israeli attack on Syria unfold, and just to stress that this was not something new. Israel has been attacking Syria throughout the dirty war hundreds of times, bombing on behalf of the al-Qaeda-led insurgency, right? But as you said, this was the deepest strike in Syria to date, rivaling only the attack on the Iranian diplomatic facility, which helped lead to the recent Israeli attack on Iran directly. But back in 2013, the New York Times carried this quote from Alon Pinkas, who is like a former Israeli consul general in New York. And this is what he said about Syria. This is back in 2013. This is a playoff situation in which you need both teams to lose, but at least you don't want one to win. We'll settle for a tie. Let them both bleed, hemorrhage to death. That's the strategic thinking here. As long as this lingers, there's no real threat from Syria. So I think the policy continues today. Just encourage as much internal strife and conflict as you can, and Israel always wins. That's what I think they're still pursuing by even bombing their de facto allies in the Al-Qaeda government.
That's partly why the U.S. armed Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq war. And they called it the Blessed War. You know, as long as Israel's enemies are fighting one another, Israel comes out on top. I don't know if I emphasized enough just how disgusting the sectarian violence of the Syrian. I can't even call it a government. It's like it was appointed by a military council, came in by force. You never hear it called a regime though in Western media anymore. I mean, this is the humiliation that Druze people have been enduring at the hands of these sick sectarian fanatics. They've been shaving the mustaches of Druze elders to humiliate them on camera, just like they made Alawite men bark like dogs while they walked on them. This is like what the Nazis did to Orthodox Jews in areas they captured, is they would shave them publicly, shave their beards. It's Nazi-like behavior, and there are far worse atrocities we could show, but we don't want to be demonetized. And there are dozens and dozens of Alawite girls who've been missing, who've been basically trafficked to Idlib, to these fighters. It's a colossal atrocity, and this all happened as the U.S. ending sanctions and relieving Mohammed al-Jolani, aka Ahmed al-Shara, of his terrorist prescription by the State Department. Now, we oppose sanctions on Syria because it's sanctions on all people. It's economic war on all people. And it's the Syrian opposition and the human rights frauds like Ken Roth who supported those sanctions in order to achieve regime change in Syria. And it still plagues Syria and has destroyed the country. So we oppose that. And Israel doesn't have any place to decide the future of Syria. Syria's sovereignty has to be respected. But the Syrian government of al-Shara should go to hell. I mean, they are out to commit genocide against Syria's minorities. And that's one of the things that made Syria so special, and what made visiting it so awesome, was that it really represented this mosaic of civilization that these sectarian fanatics aim to destroy. And I'll get into that next.
Well, and one more aspect of the sectarian warfare. In Damascus recently, there was a suicide bombing at a church during services.
Yep.
It killed a bunch of people. And the government's the Jolani regime's response to it was pretty indifferent. The way the statements were worded from analysts that I read. I don't speak Arabic, so I couldn't do the translation myself. But basically, that there was even sort of a callous reaction to the suicide bombing on a church in Damascus that killed a lot of people.
Yeah, this is what happens. This is what had happened in every area where ISIS and Al-Qaeda had penetrated. And this is what al-Shara depends on for his muscle, is these ISIS forces. They're wearing ISIS patches on their uniforms. I mean, you can see that. So if you're Druze, if you're part of any minority group, what do? I mean, it's like you're Charles Bronson in The Bad Neighborhood. You got to arm yourself up, and then they just get slaughtered, and then Israel cynically comes to their rescue. I mean, it's exactly what we predicted would happen. I was looking at my old tweets from like 2018, predicting all of this would happen, and then, getting attacked by the usual suspects. This is what Mehdi Hassan wanted. This is what Owen Jones wanted. This is what Murtaza Hussein from Drop Site wanted. They all clamored for this. The ISO, the International Socialist Organization or whatever they called, which now is part of DSA. They called in their official journal, Jabhat al-Nusra, a decent working class people. Like, they clamored for this.
It's a parody.
Like the whole Trotskyist left clamored for this. CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, they campaigned for this. They called me Hitler because I opposed this regime change project.
CARE supported the sanctions too.
CARE supported the sanctions, and they pined for the death of John McCain because of his role in wanting to bomb Syria. I mean, there are just so many people who attacked us and forces that attacked us year after year after year that have basically fallen silent. I was looking at DropSite's Twitter account, and like they're not highlighting any of. Maybe I missed it, and I will like recognize that. They're not highlighting any of the sectarian attacks on the Druze. They're quote tweeting Charles Lister, who is the de facto lobbyist for Jolani in Washington, and just highlighting attacks on they call them his security forces. This is ISIS. So what's going on over there? It's like no one even wants to talk about the disaster that's unfolding in Syria. But we predicted it, and there were people who called it out well before us. And it just there's no bottom to the sickness of the forces that support Mohammed Jolani. This was after the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. This is Idlib. These are Jolani's supporters. And you can see it's being platformed by Memory, which is a Israeli intelligence front, to show, oh, the Arabs are happy that Nasrallah was killed by Israel. Israel's doing them a favor. Look at these brainwashed fanatics. No dignity at all. And they'll say, oh, yeah, Nasrallah came in and slaughtered us and prevented us from achieving freedom. Well, look at what's happening now. You have no freedom. There's no freedom. It's just supremacy and civil war and the end of Syria as a state. But Israel is now bombarding you, doing the same thing it did to the resistance in Lebanon, is now doing it to you, and you cheered them on. You basically waved Israeli flags and they bombed you. So that just to me displays a complete lack of dignity. And yet I'm not celebrating it. Israel has no place to be bombing Syria.
That's the point. Is we don't side with Israel ever, under any circumstance. They're an evil entity, and just look at them now to see why. But unfortunately, people who support a regime change in Syria, they can't say the same. They sided with Israel, and they gave Israel exactly what it wanted, which is taking out a key member of the Axis of Resistance that was a part of, and whatever. Assad's record on this is not like, perfect, embellished, but they were part of. The point is, Nasrallah saw Syria as a part of the Axis of Resistance, and that's why he ordered Hezbollah to intervene, because he thought that Syria's fall would strengthen Israel, which was the goal of the regime change campaign, as was acknowledged by the architects of it. And by the way, for people who don't like it that Hezbollah intervened in Syria, well, the people to blame are the architects of the dirty work. That's what they wanted. They wanted to draw in Syria's allies.
They said it.
Yeah, they wanted to draw in Hezbollah to weaken them, which could then help Netanyahu achieve the goals he's recently achieved by killing Nasrallah, by weakening Hezbollah, and by going on to Iran. None of that would have happened, I believe, if not for the dirty war, which created the conditions for that. So anybody who cheered on the dirty war, anybody who cheered on regime change, they helped give Israel exactly what it wanted.
And Hezbollah, now we can see why Hezbollah and Russia and Iran, the IRGC, went in. We can see they were trying to prevent this. They were all trying to prevent this, but it happened. They just delayed it. Iran also built underground bunkers, fortresses near Israel and near the Golan to help Syria protect itself. And as soon as Jolani's forces took power, they destroyed those bunkers. They spent years and years destroying Syria's air defenses. They would always take pictures of themselves after they blew up some air defense system, as Israel wanted. No one wanted that more than Israel. Now there are no air defenses, so Israel can bomb your defense ministry. I mean, it just doesn't get more pathetic than this. And I was on the border of Syria and Lebanon on the Syrian side, And people, local residents were telling me how Al-Qaeda had actually, and ISIS elements had penetrated over the Lebanese border. And one of the reasons that Hezbollah went in was to prevent ISIS from further infiltrating into Lebanon. Lebanon could have been destabilized completely if they hadn't done that. And it may still happen. It may still happen. The whole region is in peril from the forces that the Western-backed and Gulf-backed dirty war has empowered. And I don't think we've seen the worst of it. And we're certainly not going to get an apology from everyone who smeared us and tried to destroy us for years.
Yeah, and by the way, since we're on the topic, has anyone found Syria's chemical weapons stockpile yet? The chemical weapons stockpile that everyone insisted existed, and those of us who dared question the saintly intelligence agencies who said Syria's chemical weapons, we were dismissed as apologists. Well, so where's the stockpile? Like, where's the chemical weapon stockpile that Assad used to carry out so many of these alleged chemical attacks, which then happened to be used as pretext for bombing Syria and for continuing and for leading to regime change, along with the sanctions too. Everyone's along with the fact that people cheered on this dirty war, people seem to have forgotten about the chemical weapons as well. It's been 7 months at least since Assad was overthrown. They haven't found a trace of his chemical weapons stockpile. Eventually, I think they're going to come up with something. They're going to plant something and make it look as if they found something. But anyone with their eyes open, I think, can see what's going on.
Maybe the New York Times will do like cartoons of the stockpile, like CGI generated images. They'll work with like that group Forensic Architecture that drew up the fake Duma chemical attack.
Yeah, and Forensic Architecture is a case where people who do good work on Gaza got enlisted to go along with the dirty war on Syria. And I don't know what so many people are part of that, who I think mean well, and especially I'm talking about progressive media, but just the Syria dirty war propaganda was so strong, it got so many people, and those who didn't buy into it were harassed and dismissed, and to the point where there was no willingness to even acknowledge that the OPCW whistleblowers that we spent a lot of time covering at the Grayzone, that they even exist. They wouldn't even acknowledge their existence, which is like an Orwellian sort of cover up that I've never seen. It was so widespread, just the refusal to acknowledge the OPCW cover up scandal and the existence of whistleblowers and documents. I've never seen anything like it before.
Well, we've seen a lot like it since I wrote a whole book predicting all this called The Management of Savagery.
That's right.
Just lays it all out
Yeah.
pretty cleanly.
Yeah.
And I remember on my book tour, I was protested in New York by like anarchists and Trotskyists. They'd be outside my book events protesting. Like, the FBI doesn't need to infiltrate the left anymore. They just like are on full COINTELPRO. It's organic COINTELPRO. Like they're just doing it to themselves because their brains have been hacked by neoconservatism.
Someone watching this might think, why don't you guys move on? Yeah, they got it wrong, but all right, like let bygones be bygones. But if there's zero accountability on something this seismic, and people, even in adversarial progressive media get duped by it and refuse to reckon with it, I think it merits still being called out, because otherwise, like, what hopes do we have for a minimally functioning media system if if people are going to go along with some of the most consequential propaganda of the century? It would be like there'd be no reckoning with buying into the Iraq WMD scandal or a hoax, So I think it merits still being called out,
I mean, it relates directly to Palestine. Like Jolani's men are also rounding up Palestinian refugees in Syria who lead resistance groups under orders from Israel and the US. They're trying to show their good faith to the forces attacking them now. They just basically let Israel take Mount Hermon.
Yeah.
And Mount Hermon was strategic for Iran because Iran was able to would have been able to send drones or ballistic missiles through that route, which was closer to Israel, but Israel's now layered it with air defenses. And as I mentioned before, they destroyed Syria's air defenses. They have taken a leg off the resistance axis, and that was by design. And this weakens Palestine ultimately, because Palestine will not be liberated through strongly worded statements, through conferences in foreign capitals. It will not be liberated by BDS alone, although BDS is very important to it. It's going to have to be liberated by the people in the region. And, you know, you look at these like Takfiri types, wherever they are, like in the West or in the region, and they're like, you know, oh, Palestine is Gaza's so sad. Thoughts and prayers for Gaza. We must pray for Gaza. Then when like, you know, Hezbollah enters Syria, they're like, sign me up. We must fight the jihad against Hezbollah. Kill the Shia. Kill them. We hate them. I mean, there's no level of contempt for them that's, I just can't express how much contempt I have for those forces, for what they have done. And they deserve to be held accountable. And to the extent that they're trying to like be a part of independent media in the US, independent anti-war media, they need to be called out, along with the Trotskyists who are just like pre-neocons. So yeah, this is, I could be, you know, it's a nice day outside. I could be out there, but this is in addition to me bringing you facts and analysis and news. It's therapy. And so, you know, whenever this issue comes up, it's kind of like, I want to get it all out.
I share your disgust with the people who push this stuff and haven't owned up to it. It really is. And it's so sadistic. If you look at all the different levels of the Syria dirty war, the arming of a Al-Qaeda dominated insurgency, a military occupation that plundered Syria's resources, the sanctions that destroyed what was left and prevented rebuilding. I mean, it's one of the most sadistic campaigns in world history, and totally misunderstood, completely whitewashed, totally misunderstood.
Because it was also one of the biggest propaganda psyops that we were ever subjected to through, you know, the white helmets. Basically, Al-Qaeda's MASH unit became the heroes of humanity and got nominated for a Nobel Prize. Who's nominating all the Palestinian medics and Palestinian first responders who are dying in droves, who aren't ideological, who aren't trying to push some kind of regime change CIA project, who aren't funded by the outside, and who are just dying to save their neighbors and their communities from a savage Holocaust? Nobody is. We don't even hear about them.
Well, for more, and then we can leave it there. But if you want to know more about the White Helmets, go to democracynow.org and watch this segment from 2016. The White Helmets, as Syria death toll mounts, meet the rescue workers saving thousands of lives.
Is that Molly Crabapple or Crabapple in the corner?
Looks like it, but that
my God. Yeah. But she's like directly linked to that. Like she was one of the ones attacking us.
Well, this segment promoted a Netflix documentary about how great the White Helmets are. I mean,
and Molly Crabapple's next to it. It's perfect. It's like peak Democracy Now. Where is she on what's happening in Syria?
I don't know. But anyway,
and she attacked us so much, so often.
Yeah. She compared either her or someone like her compared you to being a Nazi when you visited Damascus. I remember that.
Yeah.
That was anyway.
I love it. I love it. You know, former postmodernist artist, former burlesque performer cheers on Al-Qaeda to take over Syria. Like that's the left. That's the sort of institutional left in the US. And then they all kind of disappear after a while, after writing like 3 memoirs about themselves. Like none of them are even like in it. God, I hate those people. That's why I'm suspicious of like anything they get excited about. That's why like I'm suspicious about Mamdani. It's like almost irrational. I'm like, is he the next White Helmets? But no, I'm joking. We should cover this quickly before we get out. I mean, it's just a banner day for the rules-based order. This is Trita Parsi. The man below is the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, referring to the new Syrian president. The U.S. just took his organization off its terror list and lifted sanctions on him. The woman below is the UN rapporteur on Israel and Palestine. the U.S. is about to impose sanctions on her. That's Francesca Albanese. Let that sink in. So yeah, the U.S., under the orders of Marco Rubio, has sanctioned the UN rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, who, by the way, we should note, was labeled an anti-Semite by the Biden administration. And it's whatever that fake position is, like anti-Semitism czar, Deborah Lipstadt.
Yeah.
But now they're sanctioning her. Like they're going to freeze her bank accounts. She won't be able to come to the U.S. She's basically a criminal. And what has she done?
She tried to apply the law to Israel and wrote a report recently pointing out the corporate complicity in the Gaza genocide, and is a very effective voice when it comes to this. She goes on, mainstream platforms to the extent she gets invited, and she's a really effective, articulate voice when it comes to defending Palestinian rights, and so therefore she deserves to be sanctioned. Unlike the leader of Al Qaeda in Syria, who was taken off the terrorism list, and because he's talked about Syria and Israel sharing common enemies, which plays into the U.S.-Israeli agenda. So that contrast there that Trita Parsi highlighted between sanctioning Francesca Albanese and desanctioning or delisting the leader of Al Qaeda in Syria, it says it all.
Well, she also introduced a report outlining the corporate complicity with Israel's genocide in Gaza and targeting, zeroing in on Google, for example, leading to Sergey Brin Google co-founder Sergey Brin, of accusing her of anti-Semitism. I mean, he doesn't even deny it. I'll pull that up in a second, but he doesn't even deny what she said. He just says anti-Semitism. So he's effectively admitting that his country is knee deep in the Gaza genocide. I mean, Google's a major contractor that hosts clouds for Israeli intelligence. Yeah, he calls the UN transparently anti-Semitic after its special rapporteur accused tech firms, including Google, of profiting from genocide in Gaza. Albanese's report named Google and Amazon as aiding Israel's war through Project Nimbus, a $1.25 billion AI and cloud deal. I think Nimbus hosts Unit 8200's cloud. They're just deeply invested in the Holocaust in Gaza. Brin wrote on an internal DeepMind forum, throwing around the term genocide in relation to Gaza is deeply offensive to many Jewish people. Well, good. I mean, it's still true. And you are complicit. So she was immediately sanctioned after that. And, these AI tech warlords are funding Donald Trump to the hilt. Marco Rubio will seek their support when he runs for president. So that's what I think this is about, is Albanese took BDS to the next level with that report, gave it really new credibility. This was a Palestinian-led movement launched in 2007, and it's attaining global status. And now the U.S. is seeking to criminalize it, and there are laws on the books in various states that ban corporations from boycotting or refusing to do business with Israel. So this is an attack on everybody's speech, but it also shows how desperate the United States is to sanction someone who's a UN rapporteur. I mean, I think it obviously blew back on the U.S. because she has achieved new prominence on the global stage. And I should mention before moving on to do you want to quickly cover the Hague Group?
Yeah, sure.
There are new reports that Karim Khan, who is the ICC prosecutor who introduced an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, and his former defense minister, Yoav Gallant, have been threatened. A British-Israeli defense lawyer at the ICC, linked to a Netanyahu advisor, told Karim Khan to drop his arrest warrant or be destroyed. Karim Khan was placed under surveillance by the Mossad. This sex scandal cropped up after he introduced his arrest warrant. He was forced to kind of stepped down for a time. His entire staff has had their visas pulled by the United States. I mean, the US and the Israeli intelligence are not even hiding it anymore. They're just seeking to openly destroy the international legal system in order to preserve their genocide. And this happened even before Karim Khan with his predecessor, Fatou Bensouda. This is a Guardian report in 2024. Israeli spy chief Yossi Cohen, who is the predecessor to the Mossad chief David Barnea, threatened ICC prosecutor over war crimes inquiry. Personally involved in secret plot to pressure Fatou Bensouda to drop Palestine investigation. She launched the investigation starting in 2014 after Israel destroyed large parts of Gaza, and Karim Khan had put it on pause, and then he finally delivered this arrest warrant, and now they're freaking out. So in a way, Israel's losing on the global stage, and it's provoking a harsh international, not a harsh international backlash. Actually, the international backlash has been kind of pathetic if you look at it from a material point of view. But there is a new group called the Hague Group, which I guess formed in February under the watch of something called the Progressive International, which includes, I think, around 30 countries. They gathered in Bogota last week and issued kind of a resolution. Sarah Leah Whitson, who heads a group called Dawn in Washington, sums it up as follows: full embargo on weapons to Israel, blocking ships carrying weapons to Israel from docking at ports, ending contracts that support Israeli occupation, supporting prosecutions of Israeli criminals at national and international levels. I mean, these all sound like very welcome resolutions from these countries, but just quickly, there are some issues. Well, there's some really positive things I can see about the Hague Group. First, that it has brought Latin American countries into the fold, like Nicaragua and Cuba and Venezuela, which have even been targeted by supposedly progressive Latin American neighbors like Brazil. And Lula da Silva, who has been no friend of Venezuela, kept them out of BRICS. Nicaragua has been castigated by the Puebla group of sort of center-left Latin American countries, and Cuba. These are all very sanctioned countries who've always stood on principle for Palestine, but they basically have no relations with Israel. So I'm not sure what else they can do. Gustavo Petro, who convened this conference, who's the Colombian president, seems really principled about this and has suspended coal exports to Israel. But then there are other countries that are involved in the Hague Group, like Turkey and China, who have a much less clear stance on Israel-Palestine. What are your thoughts on the Hague Group, Aaron?
I saw Gustavo Petro's comments, and I thought they were very moving and inspiring, and Francesca Albanese's as well. And I haven't looked into it like you have, but it's good. I mean, just some sort of international gesture of solidarity with Palestine to me is always welcome, even though I know there's a lot of complications. China especially could do a lot more than it's doing for Palestine. I don't know very much about China, but they just don't ever strike me as being willing to get into a fight with the US in areas outside of their own domain. Like in Syria, they could have stepped in and helped stem some of the bleeding there by evading the sanctions, helping Syria rebuild, but they never did that. And it looks to me like in Gaza, they're playing a similar role. Same with Russia too. Like Russia seems to want to play it both ways with Israel. They'll be critical sometimes, but yet they let Israel bomb Syria during the years of the Dirty War, and maintain a relatively, although it's complicated, but they seem to have a friendly thing going with Netanyahu because there's so many Russians in Israel. Many of them not even Jewish, but they claim to be Jewish just so they can move there. But look, overall, seeing some sort of international solidarity with Gaza, of course, it's way too late. I wish more had been done from the start, but I'm happy to see something that defies the current, U.S.-led system.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm seeking clarification. If anyone associated with Progressive International or the Hague Group is watching this, I want to better understand what the two most important members of the Hague Group are how they're going to change their policy toward Israel. Turkey is one of the top exporters to Israel in 2024. There's actually a protest group that's formed in Istanbul to protest Turkish gas and oil exports to Israel, which have really kept Israel going throughout this genocide, including its military. So I'm seeking clarification or clarity on whether Turkey will change that policy, and I highly doubt they will. And, I asked this question of certain power brokers when I was in Istanbul last year. And they told me that they believe the US could bring Turkey's economy to the ground if they actually stopped the exports to Israel. So they're afraid. And then China has its own reasons for sort of taking a neutral position to Israel and engaging with Israel, which is that it's currently superseding the US as the top economic power in the world. And China is one major reason why Iran is still able to exist as a country. I mean, all the construction equipment I saw in Iran was Chinese. They were only able to put up a new building thanks to China. They were signing new economic agreements and infrastructure agreements with China. Same thing in Nicaragua. Nicaragua is an independent country that isn't neoliberal, controlled by the IMF, has no future without China. And I would see the Chinese presence in Nicaragua to the point where like the guys in like a small town at a table, like having dinner at a table near me, were small Chinese businessmen. So why do they want to take on the world hegemon of US and Zionist power? But it is a little bit on the nose that before there's this conference, they're promoting better ties with Israel. I mean, this is the Chinese ambassador to Israel, Zhao Junzheng, promoting the 2025 Ambassadors Cup Wushu competition in Rehovot, Israel, and thanking the local municipality there. May this art become a lasting bridge of friendship between China and Israel. And he's also, giving interviews to JNS, Jewish News Services, which is like basically an Israeli intelligence cutout in the US. And he's hitting back at claims that China will do anything to provide J-10 multi-purpose fighter jets to Iran or any other important military hardware that Iran would need to deter Israeli attacks. And at one point in this article, he says, many of the Chinese people believe that after the war or conflict, Israel will enter into a new period of peace, stability, and development, which will bring us a huge opportunity for our high-level cooperation in different domains, in different fields. So I would like to see some more clarity on what the Hague Group actually means materially in practice for the trade practices and diplomacy of these countries that have been historically non-aligned. And that's not to malign these countries. I just, let's just be honest.
And why aren't other countries joining them? Why is it on South Africa to lead basically the global coalition against Israel? I mean, they're the ones who took Israel to the ICJ, who lodged the genocide allegation. Why is it on South Africa to bear this burden? Obviously they can't do it alone. And look, no one's above criticism. And that includes those of us in the US. I mean, we're the ones financing all of this. So as much as it'd be great if other nations stepped up and took on Israel, I mean, there has to be something domestically too, or else no matter what anyone else does around the world against Israel, it won't matter if the US policy doesn't change. And that's where anybody who, pays taxes can play a role and be a part of a movement inside the U.S. domestically.
Yeah. Well, again, would like to know more, but it's an encouraging development to see an international bloc organizing outside the UN when the UN is it's basically blocked at this point. But what can they do? We'd like to know more. I don't know. We got more elements here, but I think we've been talking for well over 2.5 hours. So I think we'll wrap here and plan to be back next week unless there's anything you want to add, Aaron.
Thanks for tuning in. Support the Grayzone at the links on the screen and below. Follow the Grayzone on Substack. And yeah, thank you, Max. This was I learned a lot in this stream, especially about Jeffrey Epstein. So thanks for the education.
Well, we've been following it for years. And so stay tuned next week for more Epstein. We're just going to talk about Epstein, just because the neocons don't want us to do it. It's amazing. I mean, no dead guys. When was the last time a dead guy caused this much trouble for a U.S. president?
Yeah. A lot more trouble than JFK has ever caused the U.S. president. That's for sure.
Sad. Thanks for being a part of this. Subscribe, like the stream, subscribe to us on Substack. Patreon is a great place where you can support us if you choose to do that. But we welcome moral support. Thanks a lot to Eric Thomas, Eric T. Red, for helping us moderate this chat to the extent it can be moderated. It definitely isn't a moderate chat. And thanks a lot to Anya Parampil for her appearance. Definitely, everyone wants to see more of her. So we'll hope to do more of that. And thanks, Aaron, as always. Peace, everybody.
I can volunteer as your nanny. That's the way to get on you more and more.
Yeah. If we get down here, if you ever make it to DC, we'll make that happen. We'll do like a supplementary stream. All right. Peace.
Peace.